Okay, for section 2, Christianity grows and spreads, your 2 I can statements that you'll be able to accomplish. Number 1, I can describe the significance of Clovis and Charlemagne. Number 2, I could explain the importance of monasteries in the Middle Ages. Okay, Clovis and the Franks. So if you take a look at our map here again, you could see that the Franks settled in this area right here. Okay. So during this time, Christianity continued to spread after the fall of Rome and continued to become a popular religion. And a key figure that helped spread Christianity was Clovis, who is the leader of the Franks that settled here. In 486 AD, Clovis defeated the last Roman army in Gaul, what we now refer to as France, and that's where he settled. And he created a large kingdom, and along the way, he converted to Christianity and encouraged others to be Christian in his kingdom as well. Later on, another Frankish king, king in charge of the Franks, that ruled from around 768 AD, was named Charles the Great, or Charlemagne. It's another name for him. And so Charlemagne, a couple of things that he did, if you look at the map, you could see he expanded the territory. So it was pretty comparable to that of ancient Rome in terms of size and strength. He organized that territory and appointed landowners to govern different regions of it. And again, he continued to encourage the spread of Christianity. Now, at this time, if you remember, we said that during the fall or after the fall of Rome, learning declined. The one exception to that was within the monasteries. So monasteries are places where religious followers practiced a life of prayer and worship. So this is where you had monks and nuns really worshiping. And during this time, the monks and nuns were really the main ones, and other religious figures were mainly the main people that continued to learn, and they continue to learn how to read and write. And part of the reason why they needed to know how to read and write is because monks would make copies of the Bible, which preserved and promoted Christian ideas. So this is kind of the one and only section where learning is continuing and people are still learning how to read and write, whereas in the common people are just worried about basic survival. They're not thinking, I need to go to school and learn how to read and write. Okay, checkpoint number 5. Describe the significance of Clovis and Charlemagne. So you're either going to write Clovis, or going to write Charles for Charlemagne, or both for each of the following statements. So helped spread Christianity, Clovis, Charles, or both. Expanded his territory to be as great as ancient Rome, again, Clovis, Charles, or both. Defeated the last of the Roman army in Gaul, was that Clovis, Charles, or both, and was a Frankish king. Again, Clovis, Charles, or both. And checkpoint number 6, again, this is another fill-in. Monasteries were important places for followers to practice a life of blank and blank. Monks would spend their days writing copies of the blank inside the monasteries. So please look in your notes to figure out what goes into the blanks. All right, section 3, feudalism, a new social order. So by the end, we've got 3 I can statements. Number 1, I could explain what happened in Europe after the death of Charlemagne. Number 2, I could explain how feudalism worked as a system of societal order. And number 3, label and describe the role of each level of the feudal pyramid. Okay, so after Charlemagne. So Charlemagne died in 814 AD, and at that point, his kingdom was divided and pretty much weakened across the board. So by mid-800s, Europe was a place of conflict and warfare. During this time, because of all this fighting and uncertainty, a new social order started to develop, and that was known as feudalism. So feudalism is a system of power based on an agreement between lords and vassals. So powerful landowners called nobles or lords gave land to lesser nobles that were called vassals. So in return for land, the vassals would defend the lord's property, and many of these vassals were knights. So if you look here, you could see the breakdown of the feudal pyramid, the actual structure. So feudal society was highly structured. The bottom were peasants. And most peasants were actually known as serfs, which means that they lived and worked on the land that were owned by the lords. And they never left that property, which is known as the manor. Okay, they kind of stayed there their entire lives. Okay. Above them, you have what we call the line of nobility. And so if you were a peasant, you could not move up in the world. Knights, nobles, and kings and queens were all to have said to have noble blood. And so you could kind of make your way up based on how much land and territory you owned. But a peasant could never become a knight because they were not to believed to be of noble birth, or they didn't have that noble blood. And again, if you notice to the side here, it says kings, nobles, and knights were all considered nobility. And again, a peasant could never move up. But if you look at the roles of each level, the kings and queens owned all of the land of a country or kingdom, and they made the laws and led the army. The nobles, which are your lords and ladies, received large areas of land from the king, and in exchange for this land, nobles provided kings with knights for their army. The knights then would receive smaller areas of land as payment for their help in battle. The knights trained from an early age to fight on behalf of their lord. And then again, finally, the peasants, again, they could never move up in the world. They farmed and worked the land of the knights, nobles, or kings. In return, they received protection from enemy attacks. Okay, so your checkpoint. Explain what happened in Europe after the death of Charlemagne. So again, fill in the blank here. After Charlemagne's death, his kingdom was blank. Different groups fought for land, so blank and blank became a way of life. And checkpoint number 8. Explain how feudalism worked as a system of societal order. Use the following words to create your answer. So in your answer, use the word lords or noble, use vassal, land, and protect or defend. And then checkpoint 9, label and describe the role of each level of the feudal pyramid. Again, use the previous notes and fill in each level.